We're building a project management dashboard today. So I've got two versions for you. We have one that's more colorful and one that is a little bit more muted with more of a corporate feel. This is a full end-to-end tutorial series, meaning we created the data set in a prior video, as well as the data model, and the playlist link for that is in the video description. So to me, a good project management dashboard should tell you the following: what's late, what's in progress, what's starting soon, what just finished, how we're doing on cost, and some kind of bird's eye view of where all the projects are at. So we're going to do all of those things today. This video has been a long time coming, meaning I started iterations of this like a year ago, and I've been overhauling it repeatedly because I wanted it to be simple, useful, and awesome looking. And it turns out it's kind of hard to do all of those three things at once, but I think we're finally there. So let's get started. Here's our data model. Like I mentioned, we built this in a prior video. This will also work with planner data if you're using planner data, with the exception of the cumulative cost comparison chart, because custom column data isn't currently accessible in planner. Maybe it will be someday, but the rest of it will work. I want to make sure that I have something that is flagging overdue tasks, because that's something that we want to highlight in this report. So I'm going to go to the transform data button, and I'm going to add a custom column here that marks whether or not a task is overdue. I'm going to go to add column in the toolbar up here and do a custom column. I'm going to call this overdue ? You can have special characters in the column titles. And we're going to put an if statement in here. So we're going to say if, and then a space and some parentheses, and we're going to do the due date is not equal. So that's the angle brackets, get it in front of the camera, angle brackets, not equal to null. Null means blank. And, just the word and, the status is not equal to complete, because we don't want a completed task to be marked as overdue. And the due date is less than right now. So right now is going to be the date time. This is case sensitive. All of this is in Power Query. Date, parentheses, date time, local now. Open close parentheses and then close that. So what this is doing is getting the local date time and then converting that to date. Because Power BI can't compare a date time field to a date field, then yes, else no. Oops, no with a capital. All right, oops, I'm missing a parentheses up here, so I gotta triple close this. So if our task has a due date, and that due date isn't blank, and it's not complete, and it's in the past, then it's overdue, else it's not overdue. Click OK, and if you want to, you can rename this step, and close and apply. It's under the Home tab. So now we need a few measures. The first one I want to do is counting our tasks, so I'm going to go to the table tools and click on New Measure, and I'm just going to call this Count Tasks, and it's going to be count rows in our tasks table. I'm creating these under a table called _measures just to organize them, but it actually doesn't matter which table you create these on. So now we're going to create the 4 measures for the 4 KPI cards in the dashboard. What we're going to do with these is reuse them for our conditional formatting in our table, so we can highlight the things that we're calling out in the cards in our other visualization. So we're going to do a new measure. This first one is going to be our in progress tasks. So we're going to do calculate, shift enter goes down the line, and we can use that measure that we just created to count tasks. Or you can count rows again if you want to. It's just more human readable this way. And then we're going to keep filters. Status is equal to in progress, or whatever your in progress status is called. I'm going to drop this into our card visualization just so that we can make sure that it's working. I'm going to use the new card visual. That's this one with the lightning bolt down here, and drop that in there. So that looks right. This next one, I can even just copy and paste our last measure and then update little bits of it. So we're going to call this count overdue tasks. And we're going to use our overdue flag here of equal to yes. There's like 18 different ways to do these DAX measures, by the way. So if you are wanting to do a calculate with a filter instead of keep filters, you can. I just like to try and keep myself in the habit of using keep filters wherever possible, because if I don't, then I forget to do it when it matters. Keep filters is supposed to be more efficient. So let's drop that in the visual. And for our count of recently completed tasks, you kind of have to decide what recently means to you. So for me, it means anything completed in the last week, but feel free to adjust the logic to whatever you want. So for this one, we want our status filter to be equal to complete. And so use a double and sign for and. The completed date is greater than or equal to today minus 7. So that's 7 days from today in the past. And completed dates is less than or equal to today. So this is a case that you probably won't find very often, but just in case. And then we're going to close our parentheses, drop that in the visual. So our starting soon tasks is going to start out the exact same way that the recently completed one did, with a calculate, count tasks, and a keep filters, but our filters are going to be totally different. So our filters are going to use the start date. So task start date is in the future, so greater than or equal to today, and the start date is less than or equal to today plus 7, so that's 7 days in the future. Again, you can shift this to like 14 days if you want, starting the next 2 weeks. And our status equal to not started. If you're working with premium planner data, you don't have a status column, just use the percentage complete on there. So the not started ones will be at 0%. All right, and drop that in our KPI cards. All right, so this is starting out in a row. We want this to be in more of a square grid. So I'm going to go to the format your visual, and under layout, under arrangement, set it to grid, 2 rows, 2 columns. If you want to, you can shorten the names of these things in your visual or in your measures. You can just double click the names of them in the field well. All right, now we want a table visual, so that's this one here. I'm gonna make this the full width almost. And we're gonna drop the fields that we wanna use in here. So those are gonna be things like your task title, status, percent complete, your dates. If you've got the date hierarchy on, if it does this year, quarter, month, day thing, just click the little triangle next to your field name in the field well and change it to the name of your column. So start date here. I'm going to drop my project name under filters, making sure that I deselect this visual, so I want it to apply to the whole page. Then we can filter this entire dashboard by a specific project. So like this one, this is the completed project, so it's got nothing in progress, starting soon, or overdue. If you want to change the format for what blanks look like in this new card visual, there's actually a setting for that. So it's under format your visual. I search for the word blank. Under values, it says show blank as, and I can set this to 0. So now we want a chart that groups our tasks by assignee. We're going to do this using our assignee dimension table. I'm going to pick one of the bar charts here. I'll go with a stacked horizontal bar chart, and we're going to drop in our count of tasks as the x-axis. And then I'm going to drop the assignee names on the y-axis, and I'm going to pull it from the dimension table because our assignees was a multi-value field. This is going to group it up by individual people. If we want to, we can drop status as a legend here. So dropping status in the legend both gives us an idea of what people are working on right now, but you can also use this as a cross filter. So for example, the things that Christine is working on are these 2 tasks right here. Or you can click on the person's name in the axis and that'll filter everything also. So that's kind of cool. So our cumulative estimated versus actual chart is one that we created in a prior video in this series on visual calculations. So I'm just going to copy and paste this off of this page onto our new tab. I'm going to put a link to this video in the video description and as a card on the screen. So if you need to know how to do this, it's right there. I'm going to move this over here. It looks like my font sizes are totally different, so I'll fix that. So the placement of these things doesn't need to be exact for right now. We're going to kind of rearrange a little bit when we add in our background later. I kind of like to make the legend as semi-bold font. Just feel like that makes it stand out a little bit more. So that's under the legend settings. Okay, so next for the icons in this card visual, I don't know if you caught this, but the colors I used for the icons match the conditional formatting in the table below. It kind of creates a visual association. My new favorite place to get icons is from Google Fonts. So the Google Fonts icons are all open source, and you can change the color of them when you download. You can download them as SVG or PNG. People like to download SVGs because they scale very well, meaning you can size them up and size them down and they won't be blurry. Power BI, when you are importing images though, doesn't right now let you directly import SVGs. You have to like make them a background in a button and it's kind of annoying. So I'm just going to use PNGs. Feel free to use whatever image type you want. So I'm going to give you the names of the icons I used. For in progress, I used the double arrow. So if you search for double arrow in here, it pops up. You can open the color picker here and pick whatever color you want. I did a really big size, so I did like 170 in here and then downloaded the PNG file. For the check mark, similar thing. I did a light green for that one and download. Not started is actually its own icon here. Looks kind of like a play button. And same color for that one. And the flag in kind of a salmon color. So I intentionally made the colors of the icons a tiny bit lighter than the conditional formatting that I used in the table, just because I feel like the lighter colors show up better on a darker background. I'm going to download that and then we're going to import those. So in Power BI, I can go to Insert, Image in the toolbar and import all of those. And scale them down. If you hold Shift, it'll keep the aspect ratio. We're going to adjust these a little bit later. I just want to get them in here. So I want to point out here that the new card visual does allow you to use images as a background in the cards in the settings, but it's very hard to position them exactly where you want them when you do it that way. So I still just insert them from the toolbar. So next we're going to create our conditional formatting in the table. And this is much easier than you would expect it to be because we already have all of the measures that we need created. So for example, if I want to highlight the ones that are recently completed with the completed date, I can go to the completed date column in the fields well, click on it, go to conditional formatting, background color. So if I go to rules, I can use our measure that we created for the count of recently completed tasks and say if that is greater than 0, then make it green. So the reason this works is because for each row in our tasks table, that measure is going to return 1 if it's a recently completed task. It's going to return blank if it's not. We can highlight those green. So I'm going to change this from % to number and say if it's greater than 0, and then just take out the second number. Somebody taught me this trick the other day. I've been using this for like 8 years and I didn't know you could just take the number out here. So we can paste either the same hex code that we use in the card visual or a slightly different shade in here under more colors. I'm going to paste my code in. I'll put these in a blog post or something maybe, so you can copy and paste if you want to, and then click OK. So now you can see those 2 recently completed tasks are highlighted green in this table with their completed date. So I'm going to do the exact same thing with starting soon, the starting soon measure, and the start date column. Just make sure that you change this to greater than instead of greater than or equal to 0. Now you can see the 2 starting soon tasks. So another option that you could do here is to create bookmarks to filter down to these specific things and put the buttons for the bookmarks on top of the KPI card. This is something I played with when I was coming up with this dashboard and I found it to be just kind of super tedious. So I feel like the association of the colors is much more maintainable than a bunch of bookmarks. I'm going to do a couple of settings changes on this visual, just a personal preference. So I'm going to go to turn off the grid colors. Under values, you can set the alternate background color to white if you want to. I just feel like it's easier to see the conditional formatting when it's not alternating like that. I also like to add a little padding in here. Just feel like it makes it easier to read. And then I like to turn off word wrap whenever I'm using the conditional bars. We're going to use that for the percentage complete. What happens if you don't turn off text wrap is that some of your bars end up double height if the words wrap around. So next we're going to do our overdue flags. I'm going to use the due date column for that. So conditional formatting and then icons, and select our count of overdue items. For the style, I'm going to use the one that has the flag icon in it. So that's this set here. And then we're going to remove the extra flag colors to just leave the red one. So same thing, if this is greater than 0, then it's overdue. Click OK. That added a flag next to the overdue items. And now we can also add our color for the statuses and maybe the hyperlink for the tasks. So this dataset has a URL for each of the tasks, meaning you can click it in the table and it'll go to the task in Microsoft Lists. You can do the same thing in Planner, although it's a little bit trickier to get the URL for that these days. So I'm going to go to conditional formatting and set it to web URL and select our URL fields, which was, what do I call it, link, item link. Click OK. And then status is the text column, so we can just make rules for the text values. I guess this is case sensitive. Yeah, there we go. Okay. All right, at this point, we're going to go ahead and import the background image. So the link to download this background image is in the video description. I'm going to link it on the screen. I do ask for your email address to send you the file. It's just for a newsletter, not for anything nefarious, I promise. So to use that background image, I'm going to go to the Format Your Report page button in the side panel and go to Canvas Background and then browse for an image. So that background template pack comes with a bunch of different backgrounds. So use whatever ones you like. Some of the blue ones were used in a prior tutorial, so I'm trying to keep them all in one pack. So I'm going to use this 3-tile purple one here. There's a gray equivalent if you want something that's a little bit less colorful. And then the important part is to turn off the transparency and then set the image fit to fit. So you'll notice that we have backgrounds on all of our visuals that we need to turn off. So if you highlight one of these, search for the word background, it's under effects, you just turn it off. Do the same thing for cards. We're going to move everything around and rearrange in a second. I'm just going to get these all off so we can see what we're doing. So reposition everything as needed, and then we're going to change the font color on all of these ones up here to white. Technically, you can change the font color in the theme settings to do everything at once, but then it's going to change it everywhere, and you may not necessarily want your font to be white everywhere. So I like to set it on just the visuals that I want to change it on. The fastest way I found to change the font on all of these is to just search for the word color, and then look for anything that's gray or black and swap it to white. And we're going to change the line color too of this one to white so you can see it. So that was the estimated amounts. And then I'm going to change the actual cost to the same color as the completed tasks. Add a title if you want to. You can set the background on this to transparent also. The trick I use to get the star icon in that title is to just copy and paste an emoji from Windows. That's Windows period on your keyboard. You can use these emojis in measures too, by the way. It's kind of fun to do that. But if you need to reposition the text box, grab the ellipses menu on it instead of trying to grab the edge of the visual because it's hard to click. Okay, so we're looking pretty good here. I'm going to add our variance column to the table along with our estimated hours. So the estimated hours and variance are kind of just a way to show which of the tasks ran really over on cost. And I forgot to do the percentage complete bar, so let's do that really quick. So in our table, we go to the percentage complete, conditional formatting, data bars. We want this to be kind of a light gray. And instead of setting the minimum to lowest value, set it to custom and then enter 0 there because that's 0%. And for highest value, custom 1. So this was a percentage type column. It's out of 1. Using a lighter color on your percentage complete makes it so that you don't have to conditionally format the text also, because when the text overlaps on a darker bar, you can't read it very well. So what I'm using for variance here is going to be dividing the sum of our actual hours. This is a column on our Microsoft list that people can enter data into, minus the sum of our estimated hours, and then a comma. So a comma is going to be the thing that's doing the division, and divide that by the sum of our estimated hours. And on that, we want a filter of the status equals complete, because only the completed tasks will have actual effort hours. And then hit the percentage sign to show it as a percentage and set the decimal places. Probably don't need any decimals on that. And then I'm going to drop that in the table with our estimated hours as a comparison. So this number by itself might be confusing to people without conditional formatting, but I want to point out something that happens with the table visual. So if I take out the estimated hours, you'll notice that a bunch of my rows disappeared. Everything that had a blank labor variance percentage just disappeared from this table. So that's a thing that happens. It likes to hide things that are returning blank. So if you have that happen to you, you can show all of the rows. Just go to any one of the text columns in the table visual and go to show items with no data. So that'll make those rows show back up. It still does weird things with the conditional formatting for the hyperlinks. But if I drop that estimated hours back in here, then that fixes it too. So for the variance conditional formatting, I'm going to use the same colors so that I was using earlier, just to kind of keep it consistent. So we're going to go to conditional formatting, background color, and then this one I'm going to do gradient. And what happens when you put your colors in here, if I do green at the bottom and then the pink at the top, you'll notice that it kind of ends up brown in the middle. And that can get a little bit weird. So what I like to do is add a middle color and make your middle color white. So that just kind of creates some separation between the green and the red so that you don't get brown in the middle. And then we need to set the values for these so that they're accurate. So we want these to be custom. So we're going to go with negative 0.15 for the minimum and positive 0.5 for the maximum. That'll give the things that are just over 0 a little bit of a light pink. So other things you could do with this, if you want your task data to show in a matrix where it rolls up to a project in a grouping, I have another video on how to use the matrices with task data. So I'm going to link that in the video description. And I just realized we didn't take the border off of this. So I'm going to take the border off the cards, disable that. And then if you want to kind of create some visual separation between these cards, you can add a fill to them with a little bit of transparency. So for the cards, I can set this to rounded rectangle and then turn on the background, but just put the transparency to be pretty high, something like that. And then I'm going to dial back the corners a bit here. And then you might also want to semi-bold the card labels. If you want to adjust the card padding a little bit, just set it to custom under the cards category, and then you can increase the spacing a little bit that way. So another interesting thing we can do is to conditionally change the name of our dashboard based on which project is selected in the filter. So if I come back to the filter pane, I'm going to turn on this require single selection because I don't really want people to have 2 projects selected at once. So we can do this with a measure. I'm going to go to our measures here and we're going to create a new measure. I'm just going to call this text. And we're going to set this to be equal to the selected value of our project name, the one on our tasks table. I don't know why I have one on flags too. All right, so that's interesting. But if people don't have something selected, it's going to return blank and look weird. So what we want to do is put a little if statement in here. So we're going to say if it's equal to blank, then all projects, else, and by else I mean comma, use the selected value for the project name. And then we can insert this in our text box as a project name. I'm just gonna do like a pipe character to split them, and then we're going to go to the plus value in the text box, and we're gonna put in the name of our measure. I have a whole video on how to use measures in text boxes. If that's interesting to you, you can check that out. I'll put the link to that in the video description. So I can even just copy and paste the name of the measure in here, and it takes a long time. So when you paste this in here and nothing happens, don't think that it's not working, just give it a second. See, it finally came up. That took like almost 30 seconds. So select it and then give it a name and click save. And now I need to format this. So the text selection for the inserted measures is wonky. You can't select partial text, just select all of that chunk and then set it to the same size and font as before. You could put it to white. Okay, so this purple underline here only shows up in Power BI Desktop. In the cloud, when you publish it and people are looking at it, they won't see that underline, just FYI. So now you can see when I select these, it changes. So that's our dashboard. Next, we're going to do the Gantt chart. So I'm going to make a new page. A couple of things to point out about the Gantt chart. I'm going to use the Microsoft Gantt chart, which is an older one. In the core visuals roadmap for Power BI, there is a new Gantt chart coming. It's not out yet, and they don't have a date of when it will be ready, but there will be a new Gantt chart coming. So I just want to be clear about that. So the Gantt chart I'm going to use, if you go to this ellipses menu in Power BI, and then go to get more visuals. If you search in here for Gantts, it's this first one here, the Microsoft Gantt chart. You can see that it's got 3 of 5 stars. That's fair. Most of these other ones are paid. So that's why I'm using this one, is because it's free. So if you click on that one to install it, I already have it here. It'll show up in this section below your visuals menu. So I'm going to add that to the page, and then we're going to drag some of our fields in here. So the thing that it wants for the task field is the title of your tasks. And for the parent, I'm going to put the project name in here. You could also use the bucket if you're showing a single project, or the phase if your data is structured differently. What that does is it groups things up under your project name. If I expand this out, you can collapse all. I need to put my dates in here. It looks a little funky right now. So add in your start and end date. For end date, I'm going to use the due date because I don't have a finish date on this data set. You don't want to use completed date because that's going to be blank for things that aren't done yet. You'll notice that for due date, it auto-summarized it to earliest due date. This is just how this visual works. There's only ever one due date per task anyways, right? So that it's doing earliest is fine. If you don't want it to say earliest, just take that word out of there. For the percentage completion, we have that. We can drop that in. This automatically summarizes also to count of percent complete by default. You don't want it to be on count because that's not useful. Set this to something like average instead. For resource, this is going to be text that appears next to the bar. So you could put your assignees here. You could put your bucket name here. You could put whatever you want. I'm going to put my comma separated assignees there. Tooltips, I'm just going to leave blank. And this data set doesn't have milestones. So in here, if I go to category labels, this is the groupings over here. You can change the width of this so that you can actually read it. That can be helpful, right? I have noticed it sometimes do weird things if I increase it more than 150 wide. Right now it's being normal and fine, but the scroll bar sometimes does strange things. So if you have issues with the scroll bar being weird, just set it to 150. Task completion is blank by default. Set this to 1 because our completed percentages are out of 1, right? So if you open one of these up, you should be able to see the percentage complete functioning. Yeah, here's some that are not completed. So the tooltip automatically has anything that was in the visual in the hover. It has the times in there, even though this is a date only field. We can fix this under tooltip settings. There's an option for date format. If you put in here what you want your date format to be in text. So I think it's capital M, lowercase d / year. That should work. If I hover on this now, it's a normal looking date. So you can format it however you want to. And then under task settings is where you can change the color. So these seem a little bit tall to me. I'm going to set this to like 30 instead of 40 and then make the color something that matches our theme. The other thing you can do here under date type is set what you want your timeline bar to be. So we have some options here. Week, month, quarter, year would be the typical ones. Month, I think, is a good balance. And you can set your today color. That's that vertical line that goes up and down. So for the title, I can just turn this off and then put the title on the page because it's the only visual that's going to be on this page. And then import a background if we want to. So same as last time, go to canvas background, browse. I'm going to pick this, this one that has a full width area and then turn off the transparency, set the fit to fit, and then move it around a little bit until it gets in a good place. And then if we want to add a title up here. So that's Microsoft Gantt. Keep your eye out for the release of a hopefully better Gantt in the near future. Again, the link to download these backgrounds is in the video description, but everything you need to recreate this is included in the prior videos and in this video. So thank you for watching and I hope you have a great day.